Yowza. Another UNLV All Access podcast. 3-0, 3-0, 3-0. I did not think the Rebels would be 3-0 at this point. They just took out Kansas. I'll readily admit I had the team pegged for 7-5 or 8-4. I thought the schedule, especially at the beginning on the road, would give them troubles. They would at best split with Houston and Kansas. They swept them. They swept two Power 4 teams out of the Big 12. It's Cofield. It's Caleb Herring. So what does it feel like? And I want to get the former player perspective. You have a lot of pride. What does it feel like to get that win in front of a packed house? It was 21-5, but so what? It was loud against a Kansas.
It was, first of all, that stadium was loud. I don't care what the number was. They all 21,000 were on their feet making noise or something, or just the acoustics were great. But that was probably the loudest stadium I've been in with a UNLV game outside of the big house. But it feels great. There is this pride that swells up inside. Watching your former team go out there and on the national stage kind of prove people right. We have a group text with all the men in my family talking about college football. A couple of us are alumni of alumnus, I guess is the way you say it, plural, but of different university, one of Washington Cougars, USC. So we talk trash about each other's university, and I haven't been able to talk much trash as of late, but like to send out the screenshot of UNLV in the top 25 this past weekend was pretty awesome. It was really cool to be able to do that, to see the reaction of fans who have been longtime Rebel fans, who are seeing something for the first time as far as the rankings and 3-0, and enjoying being winners, really like being winners, not just enjoying winning, but enjoying your team being considered a winner. And that's a really special feeling. There was times during that game where it was touch and go. It was emotional. It was a roller coaster. But that's what college football is supposed to be. And I think that's when you're involved in the conversation, when you have something at stake, when it's not just the same old, same old. I think that feeling should be expected. And that's what I felt during the game, and that's what I felt after the game. This great pride in UNLV. And that's kind of, I think, what Eric Harper, when he took over as AD, wanted to tap into, was that university pride that helps the experience of the present guys. Like to see Jackson Woodard and Jacob DeSuze. We have moments in passing on the road, especially where we see each other in the hotel and we'll say what's up. For those guys to feel that from me and the Steve Stallworth who was on the trip, to feel that from the guys that came before them, to feel that they have pride in what they're doing now, I think is a cool thing. And I think a lot of programs build and use that as a motivating factor to push the guys that are playing and those that are coming in the future. But I can say personally, I'm very proud of a 3-0 start. It's early. It's 1/4 of the season, but it is a good start. And like you said, a start that most people didn't expect. And kudos to you, Steve, for admitting that you didn't think that this would happen and being okay with saying that. A lot of people are not as strong enough to do that. So kudos to you. But 3-0, it feels great. And two Power 4 teams on top of that. I don't think a lot of people across the country would assume. I think we could have expected they got one of them, but to get both of them to sweep the Big 12 on the season, I think is a massive deal for the program and where they want to go.
Yeah, for me, when I make picks before the season, I'm not basing it on emotion. Like, I'd love to see UNLV do well. Indirectly, I work with UNLV through Learfield, but the way I looked at last season was the Rebels made a lot of breaks. They had a lot of games where they got off to not so great starts and they came through, and that sort of flips year to year. But I have to admit now too, maybe this is something that will continue. Now they want to get away from looking, kind of on the wrong side of things in the first half, but I guess we can gain more confidence here in the staff and the players that they stick to it. The coaches make adjustments, and this Kansas game is a perfect example. I mean, it did not look good in the first half. That game felt like it could easily be, 28-6 going into the final minute of the first half, but they finally got some stops. They gutted it out, and then we'll get to halftime right before the half in a second. But let's get Barry Odom spoke on Monday. Let's get Odom's take on the top 25 thing, because I'm generally a glass overflowing guy. I really am when it comes to sports. I don't think it's that impossible to be a top 25 school. I don't think it's impossible to excel in sports. I think it's about being together from the top down, and you got to make the right hires. But I think almost anyone can do it. And the fact that UNLV hadn't done it in the history of their football program, like I I didn't know that. I thought there was a moment in time where they were in the top 25, but this is pretty special. But, Odom's very baseline. I wanted you to listen to Odom here react to the top 25 ranking, and then we'll play another bite after that, sort of the way he's playing this from a motivation standpoint.
We also know that we've got to go earn it again next week, and the next week and the next week on down the. Got a lot of season left. I mean, there's 10 weeks left, 9 games and of regular season. So we got a lot of work yet to do. We're not anywhere close to where we need to be, but for guys to have some respect and recognition on what they've done up to this point, certainly excited for them, for our team, and I think the things that we know that we can accomplish in this program that I want that to be a goal for this to be not uncommon for us to be ranked. I want it to be something that is expected, and I know it takes great work to get there.
So that attitude right there, that's the optimist in me. And there's also a baseline. Like, it can be done, and the school should expect to be in the top 25 every year and have a good football program. There's nothing outlandish about that.
And I think that is when you look the consistency of his messaging, from that to the winning habits to what their goals are as a program, it's consistent, because I think a lot of people get focused on the result, and in this case, the result being a top 25 berth. But the process for all of the goals is the same. Like the process for winning a game, the process for beating Reno, the process for winning the Mountain West Championship game, for being ranked in the top 25, the process for that is all the same. The work is the same. And I think that's more Coach Odom's focus. And his aim is to concentrate on the work day in and day out, so you don't feel or look different based on, a number being in front of your name. And you look at the top conference, like, could you imagine Alabama like getting excited about being ranked top number 25? And like for perspective, like that's they're used to that. It's a thing. Like being ranked is we're supposed to, right? And that's not to put UNLV and Alabama in the same conversation yet. That's not exactly what I'm doing here, but that shouldn't be a surprise. It shouldn't be a shock when you put the work in and you understand you've established the right winning habits. That will come. And I think that's kind of the messaging I'm getting from Coach Odom in his presser, is that this was inevitable based on the work that they've already started and the work that he started since day one. It was inevitable that you would eventually get ranked. It's inevitable that you'd end up in a championship. I think even he would be kind of, a little bit of a liar if he said he thought it'd happen that quick. The Mountain West Championship last year, and then, the top 25 this year. Yeah, you could see it. It makes sense for it to be after the third game with the level of competition they've beaten the first three. So I like it. I know we're not there as a community. I'm not going to say, inside the locker room, I don't know the temperature from what they've done. I think they all have bought in. They've said all the right things in public. I don't know how many people in private in the locker are really like geeked out about the fact that they're top 25 and how they play now as top 25 and 3-0. But I know outside we're not there. The community is not all the way at the point where this isn't a big deal to them. And I think it's okay for that to be the case in the community. Can't be the case in the locker room. But I think it's okay for the community to be really fired up to be able to see for the first time their team at Allegiant Stadium as a number 25 team, top 25 team. That's cool. That's like for the community. For me, the old guys, that's like sense of pride, like I said. But everybody else, like in the locker room and internally, I think he's right on point. Like this needs to be the standard. Like we should expect to be ranked highly or in competition for championships. That should be the standard internally.
Here's what I'm talking about, dealing with prosperity, because, if you've never been in the top 25, as you said, they could be all geeked up. Here's some of the messaging.
To the team, we had a team meeting this morning, and I addressed it and said, this is where we are, what we've done up to this point, and you want to keep it, go earn it. You got a blank sheet of paper in front of us, and you want that number beside your name, then what you have to do, what we have to do. And pretty simple messaging on that, and also threw up a nice little slide of rat poison, because all those great things that you hear and you read, it softens your character. It softens your ability to stay on the course and to stay hungry. And certainly what we need to do to become the team that we want to be is we've got to push There cannot be a cruise control. There will not be, because we're not anywhere close to where we need to be.
I like that your face never cracked. Just looking at the camera like, yep.
It's like listening to the pregame speech. I envision myself sitting in that meeting, like in that team meeting, like coming in thinking like, oh yeah, we're top 25, we're hot stuff, and then just getting a reality check from the coach. Like nope, you ain't done nothing yet. And in this case, I think it helps that the games have not been perfect. Even against Utah Tech, it wasn't perfect. There was plenty to be like, we got to be better. So it's not just blowing smoke. It would be different if you blew out every opponent, 50-0, and we're hitting on all cylinders, completion percentage high, third down, 100% third down conversions, whatever the case may be, no touchdowns allowed, all that stuff. It would be different if that was the case, because then it's like, coach, we know you're blowing smoke. Like we're hot shit right now. But the fact that they can look at the Kansas game especially and say, no, we were getting our butts handed to us for portions of that game. Like we didn't play our best ball. So we know now there's a vulnerability with these next 4 opponents being really high quality opponents. We know that we're not perfect. And if we don't bring it any given week, we can get knocked off of where we've climbed up to. So there's again, 3-0, it's a blemish-free record. But the fact that he has and the coaching staff has so many blemishes internally that they can say, this is why we're business as usual. This is why it's not a big deal. This is why you need to stay locked in and don't, eat any of the poison that you're reading about yourself right now. It's because X, Y, Z. Yep. That I think is going to be so important, especially in the bye week, going into Fresno, which was if you're going on the revenge tour for UNLV last year, this is one of the games that they let get away, and they jumped out on Fresno and let Fresno crawl back because they are a good football team and they will beat you if you let them. So I think the messaging is spot on for right now. And again, like I said, the internal message is not going to align with the external expectation and excitement. So, but I love to hear that. And I can imagine that the vigor that he delivered that team message was a little bit more intense than what he said in the presser.
Yeah. He's pretty calm at the press conference. Wasn't calm in the game. There was a lot of things to manage, and they did a hell of a job managing it. And, to the point that, hey, we got to be better. You think about some of the things that they got some breaks. They made some breaks. I mean, the Sluka fumble late in the game, that easily can go the other way. You get poor measurements on the 4th and short and, 4th and goal and a touchdown. You get poor measurements. Jalen Daniels throwing some bad balls out there. Good instincts by Jackson Woodard and Jalen Catalon. All those things turn around a game, and all of a sudden you could be losing by 2 or 3 touchdowns. So, no, they have plenty of room for motivation. Let's talk about in the game. Did you think that, one, Sluka got the 4th and short where he was like on top of the pile, and the touchdown by Kylan James, did you think that was in? I actually had a listener comment to me. He's like, oh, you didn't think he got it, huh? Because I came down the line on the field and I was like, he didn't get it. I was just kind of being like, negative, pessimistic guy, almost like reverse jinx. What do you think? You had a higher vantage point. Could you see it better? Did you think they got both?
So the touchdown was pretty clear to me that he got the touchdown. The Sluka sneak, and anytime there's a sneak, there's no real telling where the ball is. And any official that says they got the spot perfect or got it right is just full of it. That's why the reviews are never overturned in those when they're spotting it out of a sneak. But what I look for is any surge, and if you get any sort of surge, that's what the official sees from the side, and he just sees a surge, so he automatically, and maybe without even thinking, just inches forward a little bit, and that adjusts the spot just for having a little bit of a surge.
Yep.
So I think there was a surge, and I initially on my thought I was like, if you move the ball at all forward with inches to go, then you're gonna get good spot, favorable spot. What sucks, especially in those sneak situations, if you get stonewalled and then go backwards after you get stonewalled. Yeah. I think the benefit there, especially with the push that you can have from the backfield now, is even if you don't get a big surge initially, you can get a late surge and kind of roll into more yards or fall off that initial contact and get more. And I think that was the case with Sluka, at least from my vantage point up high. I thought he surged enough to say there was forward progress to move the line of scrimmage forward. It wasn't much. And I if you went and got a laser measurement, it might not have been enough to get the first down. But his surge I think was enough visually to get the officials to move forward a little bit.
It is one of the dumbest things in 2024 football that we have. Why don't we have the sensor on the ball and something like tennis? And they were talking about it in the NFL. This has got to stop. You can't have old guys running. I mean, the poor guy the other night was a Monday Night Football chain gang, like almost killed himself because he tripped over a yard marker and then slammed his head on the turf. Get these guys out of here. If I could punch someone in the face through the radio, it would have happened last week because one of the radio broadcasts had on Gene Steratore, and he starts joking about the index card. Remember he did that to the Raiders?
Yeah, that was ridiculous.
Not funny. In college athletics and state budgets, we're talking about millions of dollars at stake, and we're still doing this stupid system while tennis solved it like 10 years ago. There's no arguments in tennis. It's in, it's out. You want to replay, you can do replay. It's so dumb that we're not there yet. And as a player, I would think all the players in the NFL and college football would be like, we don't want to have to rely on this. Did we get it or not? Do we win or not?
I think I agree with you 100% with the accuracy and getting every call right. And the ability is there. I would assume that the technology exists to where you can get a laser measurement of where the ball actually was without the official having to spot it. However, there is an entertainment aspect to the drama that this creates. Keeping the human error element alive, the balance between what is technically available to us and what we as humans actually want, and what is entertainment and what is polarizing, quite frankly, is I think it has to stay. It's like if you were to play a video game. This is going to be a weird analogy, but stay with me. If you were to play a video game and you went to play, Dynasty mode, let's say college football, it was the game of the summer. So if you're playing Dynasty mode in college football and you get to every game and you just hit simulate game, and the results of the game are all, X's and O's, numbers, statistics, probabilities, and everything. And the winner is who the winner's supposed to be at the end of it. And you do that for an entire season. Did you really have fun playing that video game? The game simulated itself. We have the capacity with all the advanced analytics and what technology is capable of. You could simulate the game enough to say, we know who the winner is before we play. And we know if you're going to get that first down or not, based on the probability, based on these numbers. But isn't it entertaining to watch Saquon Barkley drop it on 3rd and short? Like, because that's human error, right? That's we watch that for the entertainment of it. I don't think the index card was fun for half the fans, but it was awesome for the other half, right? Like I don't think measurements go the right way for half the audience, but it's drama that keeps everybody coming back. And there's nothing more exciting in college football or any level of football than when it's 4th and inches with the game on the line and you're waiting for the change to get stretched all the way out. There's something about that is very entertaining and very dramatic. And I appreciate that aspect of it. So I don't mean to bring down your party there, but it's very entertaining to watch those trains be wrong sometimes.
Touche on my rant. I had a chance to ask Odom at the press conference on Monday about gaining short yardage, the confidence to go for it. And I mentioned at the beginning, you'll hear it, like I think Saluka was actually carried over about a half a yard. So here's Odom on short yardage plays.
Player instinct, you work on things. Because I noticed Beasley on one of them was literally lifting Saluka up across.
Yeah, we got called on one of those, and it was an error on my part because we had talked about it. I haven't shown it. If you remove another player from the pile, that's a penalty, and we got one, which affected us, but also helped us because of the clock running. Made it a lot harder on ourselves that we need to be. We've worked on the push play, on what that looks like. When you go to the Eagles on the great success that they have had with that play. I'm not comparing us to them at all. But we do have a strong quarterback. We get in 13 personnel. We got a pretty good package out of that on what we can do with it. And if we can line up under center and go get half a yard or a yard and feel confident in that, man, that opens up the opportunity on how aggressively you can call for 2nd and 3rd down.
What a feeling that must be when you're the Eagles, because they've got it mastered. Barry Odom is very good at being accountable. What Will Thomas did was not part of taking players off the pile for gain. He was on the other side of the pile. He was in the end zone and he pulled someone off. That's not what we're talking about, but he's great. He steps up for his guys. But yeah, I mean, there's no doubt in my mind Beasley helped the play because Sluka was on top of the pile. He didn't have his legs on the ground. He's just like and throws him across. You know, he didn't throw him across because he could barely move him. But
yeah,
that is part of the game, is working and working and working.
And it's interesting because I think there is a rule where you can't pull a player forward. So the push is allowed, but if you're on the wrong side of him, like if you're in front of him on the field of play and you're dragging him towards yards, that part is illegal. So you do have to be careful. There is a technique. You got to understand that when you're on that pile. And Beasley was close. He's on the side of Sluka, really. And it's more like a Sluka kind of rolled into his arms and he just helped him to the ground is what it looked like, I'm sure. But that's what that play is. It's just a scrum. And we saw it a lot Monday Night Football with the Eagles. They did it a couple times. And obviously UNLV had multiple short yardage situations. Some they succeeded and some they didn't in this early part of the season. But getting under center with a strong quarterback, like Odom said, I think and a tough quarterback. It's not just being strong. I think you're going to get popped. You know, I've done many quarterback sneaks where that second wave of guys, the linebackers who are coming in after you get stymied by the defensive line, that second wave of guys is just teeing off on you sometimes. Like you're just getting smacked around before you hit the ground. There's an art to it. And Tom Brady, believe it or not, was one of the greats at doing quarterback sneaks. And he is actually who I would look at because I wasn't the most athletic. I wasn't the strongest guy. And it's all about finding the void. A lot of guys get caught up trying to go right behind the center. That's where everybody's aiming. Like all the defense is aiming right there. So sometimes you got to feel that little B gap void and you got to slide there a little bit. Sometimes your left guard has an advantage over their D tackle. You go that way. But you know, that's sometimes it's not about getting into the pile as much. It's about letting the pile fall in front of you and then kind of just walking over the top of them a little bit. But there's an art to it and it's hard to practice. Obviously you don't want to do it too much, good on good in your practices because there's a high injury risk as well to that. But in games, if you got a strong, tough quarterback, I think why not go get it? He talked about the ability in those situations to change what you would call or what you consider success on first down. If you average 3 yards a play under the formula that we can get, a high percentage of our quarterback sneaks, 3 times 3, that's 9. So you're 1 yard away after every set of downs. Now you just decide if you want to sneak it or not to get the 1 yard. So it just makes it a lot safer, to call plays that are aimed at getting to 10 yards as opposed to ripping off big chunks of yards. Staying out of 3rd and 10, which the Rebels didn't do in the game against Kansas. But when you get those 3 yards on first down, 2.5 yards on second down, 3 yards on third, it makes going for it a little bit more easy for a head coach because you have that quarterback sneak in your pocket.
Let's talk about the defense and how much better the defense was in the second half. And it's funny, I was looking at PFF grades, and they actually, in regrading it, Jonathan Baldwin had an amazing number. He got dropped a little bit. Jalen Kaitalon got bumped up, so he was the top defender on defense for overall rating. Notice that Tony Grimes still played 50 plays, even though he got moved off of the one cornerback position for quite a number of plays. Jarvis Ware was in there, and he rated right behind him. But a lot of it was the play of the defensive line first. Let's concentrate on those guys. And I keep mentioning to people, I mentioned it to Odom, they're rotating 9 defensive linemen. And at the end of the game, while guys like Doyle, he's a monster. I mean, he's played 52 plays out of 61.
Yeah.
At the end of the game, you look up, and I used to point this out a lot last year. It's Keith Conley out there. He got 30 plays in. It's Osei Agbase who got like 8-9 plays in. But on that key, stoppage at the end, you have a couple of fresh ends in there. And to me, in the second half, I thought the Kansas offensive linemen just got overwhelmed, tired. They were gigantic guys, and the rotation just buried them.
Yeah, I agree with that. The fatigue definitely set in. The defensive line rotation has been impressive for UNLV in all 3 of the first games. I would also say that Kansas came out with a really good game plan. Like what they were doing to attack UNLV was really solid to start. And I think they took advantage of a lot of the stunts and twists up front with what UNLV does defensively. There's a lot of movement and gap shifting, if you will, on the defensive front. So I think Kansas did a good job exploiting that. And some of it was probably just the script, the play that they had scripted, and kind of knowing that UNLV would do certain things in certain situations. And I think some of it was just luck. Like sometimes it just happens where the defensive line is stunning one way and your run action goes the other. Or some of it is by design. There's a lot of shifts and formations that Kansas did pre-snap that completely flip the strength of the offense. So when you're a defense, a lot of your calls are either based on the field or the strength of the offense. So where the field is, you stunt there, or where the strength of the offense, you stunt there, and or stunt away from it based on your call. And Kansas did a lot of shifts and motion where they would start off with a heavy set to the boundary, and with a couple of shifts and motions, the strength of the formation would now be to the field. And I think if you're just caught in a bad stunt, that could impact the result of the play. I'm not saying that was always the case, but I could see that being a part of the issue as well. Just the game plans were just it just didn't mesh well at the time, and they needed the halftime to kind of settle in and say, you know what, we're good, we got stuff. Let's just ease back on this, and then just get back to sound gap defense. And I think that's what they did in the second half. Just off the top of my head, it felt like the Rebels weren't as exotic before the snap, and they adjusted way better and way quicker. I distinctly remember a pressure that UNLV looked like they were showing. Kansas shifted and changed their play. The Rebels matched it like almost immediately, like in sync with them, and like, nope, we're switching to. And it ended up being a negative play because they were in the right set in the right place. So I think they made some subtle adjustments in the second half as well. But the rotation on defensive line, the rotation at all the positions, I think came in handy down the stretch, because you mentioned it. Tony Grimes was off the field for like, it felt like 3 or 4 series that he was not out on the field. But then he was fresh. He was able to get back in. And same thing with defensive line. I think Antonio Doyle showed that he was fresh down the stretch, getting after the quarterback, not just getting the sack, but pressures as well. He got, unfortunately, Danny sometimes was outside the pocket making plays still, but he was able to get him off his mark and be in the backfield and causing havoc, and ended the game with the sack. So great job in the second half by the defense, figuring it out, and Coach Shear and the boys just executing better as a whole.
You know, sometimes this is matchups too. I talked to Doyle, and we'll post the interview on our Learfield podcast page, but Doyle was saying with big kid Logan Brown, number 52, 6'6", 315, that he's like, a lot of my moves weren't working, and then Conley goes in there, and he's like, Conley's moves were working. Sometimes that's just the way it happens. And then the other thing on defense to point out, the Rebels did go into the game without arguably, third, fourth best starter on defense in Marcel McDuffie, and that meant Monty Powell had to play a lot more. That meant that true freshman Charles Correa is going to be out there. And I know you pointed out during the game, Powell was making some mistakes. I mentioned on the sideline they were really kind of drilling with him, watching the tablets. I wonder what adjustments they made and he made to shore things up at linebacker.
I think a lot of early on with Manny Powell, again, talking about Kansas' scheme, they put the linebacker position in a dilemma. And I think it was not just because Manny Powell was in there and he was getting his first start of the season. It was, I think, also because they understood Jackson Woodard is such a good player that you want to make him play with a decision to make or in a dilemma. So you slow him down in that regard. So there was a lot of read option stuff that they were going, a lot of quarterback runs that we had talked about. They weren't as heavy with in the early going of the season, but they used that quarterback option, the pitch man, to kind of give the defense a dilemma. They used play action with routes that were targeting that intermediate area in the first half to like say, hey, the linebackers are going to be in dilemma. Do you want to play the run or do you want to drop in coverage? Do you need to play the quarterback or are you playing the pitch? There are so many different dilemmas that the linebackers were put in the first half. And I think Manny Powell, probably his head was spinning a little bit like, hey, okay, they're coming at me with pace. There's tempo to this offense, all this shifting and motions. I'm trying to get lined up. And before I know it, I forgot about that tight end on the backside. Now he's dragging across, and I'm supposed to be under the drag. So that kind of stuff was happening, I think, in the first half. And it just took a minute just to take a breath, say, okay, they're not doing anything that I don't know. I know football, and I trust the game plan, but let me just calm down and execute it. And I think that was the case for the linebackers, especially. And it didn't help that Devin Neal had a monster first half. Like they were just running the ball really effectively. And anytime you can run the ball, it opens up so much more your offense. The quick screen game. They were, again, credit to Kansas in the first half because they were hitting runs in the inside, going to the perimeter with a quick screen, and getting the receivers the ball on the edges. Then play action pass over the top. They put together a really good game plan. And then before you knew it, it was Daniels on QB keeper, design quarterback run, taking it to the house. that was just a good game plan. If I'm being honest, Kansas looked like every bit of a top 20 team in the country in the first half. So credit to them. And then again, the second half adjustment for UNLV, also credit to them. They look like a top 25 team in the nation as well. So it was a great game, I think, and they figured it out. The linebacker group figured it out as the game wore on. I think things got simpler for the guys that are new to the rotation, like Manny Powell and Charles Correa.
I'll give you another dude who I thought in the first half really saved the Rebels with some unbelievable tackles in one-on-one situations. And first half could have been really bad if not for Jet Elad. He made some really important one-on-one tackles. I want you to comment on that in a second. You know, I noticed on the field after the game, the DC Michael Shear, he was going crazy. He was so happy that they got the stop. He was so happy that they won. At one point, he and Brendan Marion, the OC, they embraced. We saw Shear like an hour and a half after the game, an hour after the game, getting ready to travel back home. He was like giddy. And I thought it was the right time to ask Barry Odom about why his defensive coordinator was just so especially happy with this victory.
Because we played so poorly in the first half, and he knew how important this game was to our program. He also, go back a couple years, he was the interim coordinator at Arkansas when they played Kansas in the Liberty Bowl and won in overtime. Obviously last year's game against them in the bowl game didn't go the way we wanted. And to get a win in the way that we did with a sack, the way we played with 2 takeaways, played really good on third downs. I think, there were some things that we were searching for, he was searching for, and he found it. And what a great feeling that was to see and to watch unfold on some slight changes he made that worked. And then how hard our kids played on that side. He was excited. I want our guys to have emotion. It was a lot of fun to see.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple other things. They downplayed it, but I do think for people who are Missouri folks, beating Kansas, no matter where you are, is important. They hate Kansas. It's a super intense rivalry. And then the other one was let's just talk like human nature. The UNLV offense last year with Brendan Marion. All the headlines. He's the phenom. The defense was good at times, but it wasn't good enough at the end. And I'm sure there's part of Michael Shear who's like, man, my unit has to get the job done here. It's got to get better. So it all came together, man. He was jacked up. Good for him.
Yeah, he was really jacked up. Like you said, hours after the game, he was all smiles. Even late night getting on a plane that took hours to board. But I think there's like you said, the human nature of it. The get back, the revenge game, because the defense frankly got embarrassed against Kansas last year. Like the stat line that they put up was like, holy cow, like where's the defense at? And that's something that, Mike Shear and the rest of the defense had to take into the offseason. Like, let's be honest about it. If you want to talk about a chip on your shoulder, carrying that with you, knowing that there's the rematch pending. Right, like that game is on the calendar. It's set. It's scheduled. You're going to Kansas. There was, this unspoken, I'm sure, but understood revenge game that was kind of marked on the calendar. And I can assume that because Matt Sluka, after the game, who wasn't even at the bowl game, he was going to Cam Oliver and he's saying revenge is sweet. They're like, they're fired up. That was what they were saying on the field. So yes, it was probably unspoken, and yes, the focus wasn't broken, but everybody had the understanding that this was a big revenge spot. And I think Mike Shear especially had that in mind. Being, like you said, a Missouri guy, anytime against Kansas, that's a big deal. So, and then for his defense to play like that was as dominant a half as the defense had played. Yeah. It like as far like you take that second half and then compare it to the first half of Houston. And it really, outside of one play, the entire game against Utah Tech. Yeah. But I always want to say Utah State, but against Utah Tech, that was the best 30 minutes of football that I think the UNLV Rebels have played. They answered a lot of questions. They stepped up, and I think it magnifies it because they were playing from behind the entire game. And everybody, when there's a comeback, and rightfully so, that 9-minute drive will get a lot of attention, but they're not in that position if it doesn't start with defense, basically pitching a shutout in the second half. So I think that was the emotion of Mike Shear. I think knowing that's the first real national game, like, yeah, they were on national TV for Houston, but it wasn't, the only game on. This game was being watched by more people, by more eyes, so much at stake. We know now the top 25 ranking was at stake. Like, if they don't win that game, they don't get in the top 25. They win it, they are in the top 25. Yeah, it's not something that they're probably talking about vocally and actually making a calling card in the locker room, but they feel it. It doesn't have to be said. They understand that that's a part of the mission. That's a notch on the belt on the way to their ultimate goal. And to get that one, I think, felt really, really good.
92 second half yards for a team that was on its way to go over 500, a team that in the bowl game, less than a year ago, threw up 449 yards and 6 touchdowns on the board, 92 yards and a field goal. That was a really impressive second half. Let's close on this. So it was also all done under the specter of shocking news for many UNLV fans that they're going to reform the Pac-12 and the Pac-2 invites and gets acceptances from San Diego State, hates, Colorado State, just annoying. Fresno State, I respect Fresno, but please don't try to sell Fresno over Las Vegas. And then Boise State, which is a whole annoying thing on its own. It's a good program in Podunk, not a great school, but they make money, they draw, they're attractive. They're arrogant, but they're attractive.
Yeah.
So all of that is in the backdrop, and I'm sure UNLV fans are like, we got to win this freaking game. Just this one singular moment to go, like, shove it, Pac-12. We got to show you that you screwed up big time here. I don't think maybe the players knew about that a little bit, but the fans certainly, this was a really important game because of that, because they felt really dissed. You have all this hope, and all of a sudden, you find out the Pac-12 starting up again, and you don't get invited.
Yeah, the Pac-12 dream, I guess you could say, for UNLV fans has been there since before this realignment stuff. Like, a lot of fans thought that UNLV, as a budding market that it was, should have been invited to the Pac-12, or could have been, let's say, invited to the Pac-12 when it was at its former glory with all the teams, before all the teams bailed. So yeah, it did feel like a gut punch with all the recent excitement, the season that UNLV had last year, the anticipation for this year, and the 2-0 start. It was kind of strange to see that announcement. Yeah, timing was weird. I thought that was, one of the things I noticed. Like, this is weird, a weird time to announce such a move. But I guess that's what it's all about, like the spectacle and all that stuff, and trying to test the waters on the market and see how people respond to it. But it did feel like a gut punch. I'll admit that for me, it was like, what? Like, these programs are on the decline. Like, if you look at San Diego State and you look at Colorado, they're not, at the pinnacle of their success within their program, and they tell you that. It's not. I'm not being biased to say that. Like, San Diego State is not the San Diego State that were 5 years ago, where it was like them and Boise and Fresno competing for the Mountain West Championship every year. It's different. Like, they're on a decline. And they've already kind of tested the waters of the open market and seen that, it ain't always sweet on the other side. So for me, it was like, why is UNLV not included in that package? There's no reason, because those 4 teams added don't even make you a conference. So why announce that as if that, somehow means the Pac-12 is back? There's still teams that you need to add to make it a conference. And why wouldn't UNLV be added to that? Why wouldn't you wait until those discussions are secured before making that kind of announcement? It's just kind of messy to me. And so it pissed me off a little bit. But thankfully, UNLV, stuck it out, isolated themselves, drowned out the noise, and took care of business, because we did, as fans, collectively get to, after the game, say, stick it. Like, do you want us now? Like, is this enough? Did we prove anything with that win? Who knows? And there's a whole other conversation to that. The whole realignment stuff that I'm ignorant of. And I'm not going to pretend that I have some sort of inside source that's telling me this is what the conversation is, and this is what's really happened. Whatever Board of Regents news is coming out, I don't know. I have no idea, but I know that I would hate for UNLV and all the work it's done to get left out, and that's what it felt like. We got left out, and that you couldn't really shake that feeling over the weekend. But the win, I made some people forget. Some people are still angry about it, but I know for me, I'm just like, I'm taking my cues from Coach Odom here, and I'm just like focusing on the next mission, which is Fresno State, and how sweet it'll be to beat them at Allegiant Stadium in a revenge game.
Yeah, the Regions thing and Reno is very overplayed. That was one regent who spoke saying, hey, maybe they should be together, and multiple national people ran with that. Now, if they had any knowledge of how the regents work here in the state of Nevada, they have very little power now because they I'll use the terminology, fucked up the Chris Beard hire, and then really screwed up with Marvin Menzies raking those guys over the coals because of a north-south battle. That has cost the state and UNLV tens of millions of dollars. After that, the regents were neutered. They have very little power now. So the regents can have any opinion they want. Meanwhile, there's another regent down here who's like, absolutely not. UNR is not tied to UNLV. Bill Paulus came out, and I love what he said. He's like, we're not Siamese twins. And he said, you know what, if Nevada was in the position of power and they were going, why would we hold them back? That's so short-sighted that anyone in this state would want to make or have less money coming from. I mean, arguably, I guess if you push for both, they'd both be getting whatever Pac-12 money, which, by the way, we don't even know if it's more than the Mountain West. It's going to be a little bit more. But it's just, I don't think that's a story. If the Pac-2, 6, whatever it is now, wants to make an offer, then it's in UNLV's court, because then the other thing UNLV has to consider, and Tulane has to consider, and Memphis has to consider, and South Florida has to consider, and whoever else, Texas State and UTSA and North Texas, they have to consider, hey, what are my exit fees for my conference that I'm in? Is it worth it? How can you guarantee me that we, a new Pac-12 in that conference, are going to be getting $15 and $20 million? Is there a hope for an automatic qualifier spot in the college football playoff, which I don't think is the case? And I will actually, people are going to hate this. I'm not real big on spending public money on sports stadiums. Now, I think this would be beneficial to both universities to get UNLV in with the sort of halves. Again, I think the LVCVA should be at the forefront. They're spending money left and right for all this branding and making money for Las Vegas. You spend money to make money, so I think they should be part of this. But, yeah, I would like the expenditure. I'd like to see UNLV land in the Pac-12. Unless they really believe that the Big 12 is an option and that's going to be an option in the next 2 years, then I guess you can hold out for that. But this is far from hopeless. I think UNLV, unless it doesn't want to be in the new Pac-12, is very much in the center of discussions.
Yeah, center of discussions. Just don't get left out. That's all I can say.
Well,
and it's insane because there's so much movement, and it's nobody could have predicted 2 years ago that this is where we'd be, right? Like Oregon on the Big Ten Network was already just a mind trip to me, right? Like that just didn't. I'm still not used to that, like those things. So it's gonna there's gonna be things that happen that we don't know about, that we're not expecting, that things don't look like we anticipated they'll look like. But I think right now you just hope that UNLV has put themselves, and I think they put themselves in a position where they're going to land somewhere. The Vegas market is a real deal. It is a serious market. UNLV has become a recognizable brand in football, which is the one that moves the needle, right? They have a image for basketball, but it's not the one it was in the 90s. But they have a brand now that is in football, and they have a national presence. Whether people want to accept it or not, how big it is, we can discuss that. But it's there. There's something there with UNLV football right now. So I think they're going to be fine wherever it is. It may not be the Pac-12. It may not be, the Big 12. I don't know how it'll shake out, but I think UNLV will be okay when the conference realignment finally settles a little bit.
Well, I hope we gave out some good information there. I will mention I did this rant on the air, and after I did it, I was like, I shouldn't do that. Now I'm like, I'm going to do it again. When stuff like this is happening and there's really not accurate information and there's stories coming from everywhere, I noticed a lot of people were freaking out, a lot of UNLV fans, like, hey, how come, this person and that person's not reporting anything? one, established media actually has to have sources and has to have it confirmed before they just throw stuff out there. And I'll throw the other one out, and this isn't like I'm some bigwig or there's some exclusive. Elon Musk doesn't pay me, so I'm not tweeting stuff before the show that I want to use on the show. I get paid by Lotus Broadcasting, and I get paid by Learfield.
Yeah.
So in all likelihood, you're going to hear it here. Caleb's in a different position. If you want to do it, and I saw you react.
Yeah.
I'm also
that reaction was more of a fan. I was a fan.
And, well, as an alum,
right,
and I'm not like freak out person.
Yeah.
I just, and it's cool that, there are people out there who actually don't have bosses, don't get paid, are trying to be journalists. That's cool. That gets a rumor wheel going, and people start looking into it. But it's not the end of the world. The school's been working on it. The bosses at the school have been working on it. I think they have multiple options here. And I'll even say this, and I said it on the air today, that the worst, I guess, would be UNLV stays in a Mountain West that's rebuilt. Hopefully, fans show up and continue to fund the program, because that is important that you do that.
Yes.
This doesn't work without you guys potentially showing up to the tune of $35,000 at Fresno and the school making money, which, by the way, they had a $25 ticket special up until earlier today. Mm-hmm. And I still saw people like, why not do buy one, get one? Do you want a coaching staff that's going to make $5.5 million or not? Because if you can't pay $25 for tickets, then all of this is moot. It's nonsense.
Yeah.
You as a fan have to help fund the program. Hell, Tennessee is now adding a 10% talent fee to their tickets for NIL. It's a crazy system.
You look at USC versus LSU and what the ticket price was to get in that game. And UNLV is not USC or LSU, but those fans not only paid the ticket, they traveled to then pay the ticket and paid the outrageous hotel fees to get there and be there. And it was the most attended event at Allegiant Stadium in history. So tell me about prices again. They're trying to give away tickets, $25 a seat. You can't beat that. You can't get that anywhere else for top 25 football. We'll get on a soapbox about that some other time.
South Florida, Miami, in Tampa is coming up this weekend. They're going to sell 70,000 for it. It's a record crowd for the students. So, you got to do your part. And I will mention, if the worst that happened, this is actually an intriguing scenario. If the worst that happened would be the Mountain West rebuilds, and it's like Sam Houston State, Sacramento State, and some other schools. I don't think the system's going to stay around that much longer. But if UNLV were a football powerhouse in the 7th or 8th best group of 5, they can still make the playoff. Because Liberty might make it. Liberty might make it.
Yeah.
Right? We'll see what happens with some of the Texas schools in the AAC and Memphis. So I don't want that to happen. Like I joked the other day, like I don't think people would be enthused to go watch Kevin Kruger's UNLV run of Rebels with a home and road against Sam Houston State. Nothing against those guys or Sac State. Yeah. So the goal is to get to something that's considered closer to a Power 4 or being the Power 4. So I will step off the soapbox. Caleb, I appreciate it. Enjoy the week off, sort of, and we'll get back at it. By the way, next Barry Odom radio show is 2 Wednesdays from now, the 25th. So he has the week off. So we'll see you soon. Make sure you subscribe up at Learfield podcast page, and you'll get all these interviews and podcasts and broadcaster bites.